exponential functions. An exponential function is of the form f of x equals b to the x, or our y equals b to the x. Your base is some positive constant other than 1. The x is any real number, so it is your exponent that is going to change. And it can be positive, negative, or fractions. So any real number for the exponent. Let's have a look at the graph of 2 to the x. So our exponent is going to change. Our base is 2. So I picked some numbers to plug in. So if we plug negative 2 in for our exponent, 2 to the negative 2, remember that's going to go to the denominator. So it's going to be 1 over 2 squared, which is 1/4. If we do 2 to the negative 1, it's going to go to the denominator, so it's going to be 1 over 2 to the positive 1, which is 1/2. 2 to the 0 is 1. Remember, anything to the 0 power is 1. 2 to the first will just be 2. 2 squared will be 4. 2 cubed will be 8. And this is going to climb really fast. All right, so we'll plot on here negative 2 and 1/4. So about right there. And then we have negative 1 and 1/2. 0, 1. 1, 2. 2, 4. And 3, 8. And this is going to go off our grid. There's 6, 7, 8, about right there. So you can see these climb really fast. And it just gets closer and closer to the x-axis as you go to the left. Let's also have a look at the graph of 3 to the x. So we've changed the base. I'm going to use the same x values. So 3 to the negative 2, that's going to be 1 over 3 squared, which will be 1/9. 3 to the negative 1 will be 1 over 3 to the positive 1, or 1/3. 3 to the 0 will be 1. 3 to the 1 will be 3. 3 to the second power will be 9. And 3 cubed will be 27, so that one's going to go way off our grid. So we have negative 2 and 1/9, so just a tiny bit above the axis. Negative 1 and 1/3. Negative 1 and 1/3. 0, 1. 1, 3. 2. And we're going to be at 9. 6, 7, 8, 9. And that's as much as we're going to get on here. So again, towards the left, you're going closer and closer to the x-axis. And you're climbing really fast. This graph is a little bit steeper than f of x equals 2 to the x. If you look at the graph side by side, you can see that 3 to the x is a little bit steeper. So if you did 4 to the x, it's going to be even a little bit steeper. Next, we'll look at a few transformations. And these are going to be just like we have already looked at with functions. And so the question is, what would the graph of y equal 2 to the x plus 2 look like? Notice your plus 2 is separate. This is going to be a vertical shift of 2. It's not with the x. Right, so if you're looking at your table, it's going to move it up 2 on the y's. So add 2 to your y's. And it's going to shift the graph up 2. This point is easy to shift. Otherwise, I'm going to go to the table. So for my values, I had negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2. Those are not changing. This one I have 2 and 1/4. 2 and 1/2. 2 plus 1 is 3. 2 plus 2 is 4. and 2 plus 4 will be 6. So I've negative 2 and 2 1/4. Negative 2, 2 1/4. It's going to be about right there. Negative 1, 2 1/2. Negative 1, 2 1/2. Tiny bit more. I did the 0, 3. That one was easy to move because it was at a whole number. 1, 4. So over 1, up. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 2, 6. Over 2, up 6. There's 5. About right there. So that is the graph of 2 to the x shifted up 2. We'll look at another transformation. We'll look at y equals 3 to the x minus 1. Notice your minus 1 is up with the x. So this is going to be an x movement. And remember, they go the opposite direction. So if it's minus 1, it's going to go 1 to the right. So we're going to add 1, but it will be to the x's this time. So let's go to the table, and my x's are going to change. So I'm going to add 1 to all my x's. So this will be a negative 1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. The y values are not going to change, so we'll just bring them down. So 1/9, 1/3, 1, 3, and 9. And we will graph. So negative 1 and 1/9, so just a tiny bit. 0 and 1/3, 1, 1, 2, 3, and 3, 9. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about right there. So this graph has just shifted 1 unit to the right. Next, we'll look at the graph of 2 to the negative x. So we're going to transform our 2 to the x. A negative 1 times x is going to flip it across the y-axis. But to work it with the table, we have negative 1 times x. We do the opposite, which would be divide by negative 1. But if you multiply or divide by negative 1, it gives you the same thing. So we're going to just multiply our x column by a negative 1. All right, so we will have 1, still have 0, negative 1, and negative 2. Our y column stays the same, a half, 1, 2, and 4. So we have 1 and a half. We have 0, 1, negative 1, 2, and negative 2, 4. So you can see it has just flipped across that y-axis. We'll look at one more transformation on the 3 to the x graph. So we're going to look at f of x equals 3 to the x plus 1 minus 2. So first of all, our plus 1 is with the x. So this is going to be a horizontal movement, and it's going to go the opposite way. So we're going to do a minus 1 to our x column, or shift the graph 1 to the left. The minus 2 that is out here, this is a vertical movement. And so it's going to go down 2. So a minus 2 to the y's. So negative 1 minus 1 for the x will give us negative 2. 0 minus 1 will give us negative 1. 1 minus 1 will give us 0. And 2 minus 1 will give us 1. For the y's, I'm going to get, for my y's, I have 1/3 minus 2. So I will have a negative 1 2/3. I have 1 minus 2 will give me negative 1. 3 minus 2 will give me 1. And 9 minus 2 will give me 7. Right, so let's plot those. So negative 2 and negative 1 2/3. Negative 1, negative 1. 0, 1. And 1, 7. Next, we'll look at the exponential function with the base of e. E is known as the natural base, and e is a decimal that continues on and on. 2.718281827, and it continues. Notice the value of it. It is between 2 and 3. So this graph is going to be between the graph of f of x equals 2 to the x and f of x equals 3 to the x. So not quite as steep as f of x equals 3 to the x. I just went ahead and put some values. I plugged these in the calculator. I still used negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. So what I have is e to the negative 1, so 1 over e. E to the 0, anything to the 0 is 1. E to the 1, and e squared. And there's your graph. We have one transformation with the e to the x graph. So first of all, we have e to the x minus 1, and then we're going to shift it up 3. The minus 1 is with the x, so that's a horizontal shift, and it's going to go the opposite way. So it's going to go to the right 1. So we're going to add 1 to our x's. And so 1 plus negative 1 will give us 0, 1, 2, and 3. For the y's, we are going to add 3. So we get 3.368. We get 4. We get 5.718. And we get 10.389. So we'll try to graph these. 0 and 3.368. So this would be 0, 1, 2, 3. 0.3 is a little less than a half, so I'll go there. 1, 4. 2 and 5.718. So almost to 6. And 3, and we're going to go to 10 something. All right, so you should try all of these and their transformations doing the regular graph like e to the x and then doing the one with the transformation. Do those on your calculator and put both graphs in at the same time so you can see them. But you should try that with all the graphs that we did.